Chair calls Larry Linenschmidt. I had two choices on that, and I went with one of them. I had a 50% chance at it, so you're welcome to correct me. But we appreciate you being here today. We show you registered as Larry Linenschmidt on behalf of yourself, and you will be testifying mutually. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. That is correct. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman King, Vice Chairman Cody, distinguished members of this committee, thank you for this opportunity to talk to you today about issues of concern to me as a theologically conservative Christian and a politically conservative voter. I'm Larry Linenschmidt. I'm Executive Director of the Hill Country Institute, a Christian nonprofit. I host the radio program Hill Country Institute Live, and I volunteer with the Citizens Climate Lobby. I'm a partner with the Evangelical Environmental Network and a spokesman for Republic EN. I'm sharing my thoughts as an individual. First, I ask you to consider global warming leading to climate change as the coastal barrier and any other infrastructure projects are reviewed for the state of Texas. Global warming leading to climate change is accepted in the scientific community and is taught by scientists in faith-based and secular colleges and universities around the world. Second, I ask you to consider the numerous unanswered questions of the coastal barrier before we proceed further with it. Third, I ask you to take immediate action to make the Gulf Coast of Texas safer, particularly considering the best case 22-year projected period for completion of the barrier. As a Christian, I start with the Bible for insight into caring for the environment. God gave us dominion, which is a special type of responsibility to care for the least among us as well as future generations. The science of global warming leading to climate change has been extensively studied and verified. Christian leaders from many traditions in the faith accept the science, including Billy Graham and Pope Francis. In my research, I could not find a single college or university which does not accept and teach the science. Conservatives have a long history of caring for the environment. Ronald Reagan said states and federal government have a duty to protect our natural resources from the damaging effects of pollution. The U.S. military refers to climate change as a threat multiplier and is preparing plans for the tensions created by it. Data is not partisan. Temperatures have increased and greenhouse gas emissions are the primary cause. By reference, I incorporate what I refer to as the 2036 report by the Texas State climatologist at Texas A&M, which looks at climate change historically and future projections. I'm an advocate for practical, conservative, fiscally sound solutions to the issues we face. Regarding the coastal barrier, we do not have a clear indication of the full extent of the environmental impact. The plan is so complex that environmental reviews are done as the plans progress. We do know that the Corps indicates there will be a 10% reduction in flow in and out of Galveston Bay with the current plan, which will cause lower high tides and higher low tides. This will eliminate around 2,000 acres of wetlands. We do not know the full impact of the limit on flow since the water in Galveston Bay is cleansed by the flow into and from the Gulf. Also, many of the fish and shrimp which pass through the bay and are economically important to the state of Texas, at some point in their life cycle lay eggs outside of the bay which float back into the bay. In 2008, the cost of the barrier was estimated at $1 to $4 billion. The latest estimate, there are a couple other things in there, but we're at $31 billion. Texas is responsible for a little over 1/3 of the funding. Our state already faces large financial burdens in underfunded pension accounts and other issues. If the barrier tops $100 million in cost, which would be below the rate of increase since the time of the first cost projections, will the citizens of Texas be well served by paying $30 billion for it, as well as their share of the federal tax dollars which fund the remainder? Is it fiscally responsible? It will be 20 years from the time of construction start until completion of the barrier. The Corps reports there's another 2.5 years of studies before construction begins. What should we do in the meantime, or in the event the barrier is not constructed because of funding or other issues? We will not be risk-free from hurricanes if the barrier is completed. Regarding the three major types of damage from hurricanes, the barrier will not address wind damage. The barrier could have a negative impact on rain and flood damage from hurricanes. If the gates had been locked in closed position during Hurricane Harvey, flooding would have been worse as rainfall flowed into the bay and would have backed up there. Homes around the bay would have flooded. Even if the gates were open, the flow out of the bay into the Gulf would have been reduced by 10% due to the barrier, which would have added to the time for the Houston area to drain after Harvey. Regarding storm surge, the current Corps design will mitigate against the storm surge associated with a Category 3 hurricane and not for category 4s or 5s. Perhaps the colonel could address exactly what level of surge is managed by the barrier when it's finally completed, if it is completed. The installations along the ship channel are already mostly at that height or near it, particularly when the levees around some installations built to retain spills on site are considered. Those levees also hold out stormwater. I suggest you immediately take at least the following actions to protect the Houston area during a major hurricane. In the next 2 years, we could provide significant safety enhancement and storm mitigation. Number one, incorporate the Texas 2036 report and other relevant climate change data into plans for storm planning and flood mitigation. Number two, inspect all facilities on the Chip Channel and all other refineries and chemical plants in the area to determine the adequacy of their combined height above water when you consider both their physical location and their levees. Require all installations to be 21 feet above the current level of the Ship Channel, Galveston Bay, through a combination of their current elevation and levees. Require all installations to be prepared for 1,000-year flood levels and their location in the current floodplain maps. Build the third reservoir in the Katy area to provide for flood mitigation for that area and to slow water flow in and through Houston during major flood events. Fund removal of all housing in areas which flooded during Harvey and the other 500-year flood events in the Houston area. Bring all pressure which the strength of Texas elected leaders at all levels can muster to clean up the Superfund sites which were inundated in the major floods in the Houston area in order to avoid further release of toxic waste. Install monitors which will allow for full understanding of the release of toxic waste in the area during major storms. And then as we've talked about from Orange County and other areas, continue to fund additional flood mitigation for Southeast Texas and the coastal blend. Thank you for this time, and I welcome interaction with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Linenschmidt. Any questions? Okay, I had a couple for you, if you don't mind.
Yes, sir.
So what were the numbers that you gave us on the change in the budget from 2008 until now?
The initial numbers that I found, sir, as I was reviewing, was that the estimated cost was $1 to $4 billion back in 2008, 2009. That's from the Wall Street Journal.
And the estimated cost now was?
I had $31 billion for the total project.
Yeah. Is it your belief that that's a apples to apples comparison?
Well, it's a lot of apples, so no matter how you look at it. How much of the $31 billion, sir, is for the coastal barrier, and how much is for other items?
Well, that's my question to you.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. I thought y'all were knowledgeable. I don't have the exact numbers.
Well, and I was
but I
curious
do.
If the 2008 was the same project that we're talking about now, you see what I'm saying?
Yes, I understand. And I don't have the breakdown. I know that the $21 billion was a number, and then all of a sudden it went to $31 billion. I'm not sure what accounts for that. I haven't been able to find that. The $31 billion was a number that I just found in the last few days.
Well, and I appreciate you bringing that up, because I think that's important to know, and that's why I asked the question, and so we need to look at that also.
I'd like to look at that, yes,
in
sir.
preparation for our interim committee report. The other question you mentioned was on your recommendations of what they could do now. I think you said something about it requiring something to be built to 1,000-year. Did you say 1,000-year flood?
I did say 1,000-year, and the reason I picked the big number, sir, is that we keep having 500-year floods in Houston. Things are changing. If you read the 2036 report, we expect heavier rainfall, more flooding events. So let's go ahead and plan. I mean, you've got 22 years before the barrier comes in, if it comes in, and the barrier won't do a thing for rainfall. You know, what falls upstream is going to come down, and if we don't prepare for it, and if you cut that back to 500 years, well, that's still significant. 500-year flood instead of 1,000-year flood.
Yeah. Well, we've been engineering for 100-year floods, up to now.
Well, Houston had the Tax Day flood, the Memorial Day flood, and Hurricane Harvey. 100-year flood planning is not adequate anymore.
No, and it was a 500-year event. I mean,
yes, sir.
No question it was.
And not just one. I mean, that's the thing that's astounding, is that we have so many 500-year events. The flood maps have been revised. We need to take that into account. we're going to just keep rebuilding. You know, the federal flood insurance program, I mean, I'm a fiscal conservative. I don't know what in the world the federal government's doing in federal flood insurance. Wall Street Journal reported before Hurricane Harvey that one house had been rebuilt 13 times on the federal dole. Something's wrong with that program. And you gentlemen are elected officials. I'm just here talking. So I think there's a lot to think about. We've got really significant issues. And the barrier, I mean, at best, it will address storm surge at a certain level. I don't know what happens when we have a Category 4 or 5 storm and goes over it. So we've got 22 years to figure that out, I guess.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Linenschmidt? Yes, sir.
In recommendation number 6, you said fund removal of all housing in areas which flooded during Harvey and the other 500-year flood events in the Houston area. So do you have any idea what total number of, I'm assuming, residential structures that would be and what the cost would be to remove all those?
I don't have those numbers, Representative Harris, but I do think it's something we need to look at. And because we keep having these floods, there's nothing that indicates they're going to be mitigated or, excuse me, that there's going to be a change in weather and they're going to stop. So are we going to keep rebuilding? There's still people that haven't been able to get their lives together after Hurricane Harvey because they were in low-lying areas and they're poor. So that's part of what I think is about caring for the least among us. So
I totally agree about caring for the least among us. I was there during Hurricane Harvey and went from Nederland to Humble to Cypress and had friends who were down around El Campo. And so just trying to think through, you said all of the areas that flooded during Harvey, and I would think that would be hundreds of thousands of homes, if not millions of homes that you're suggesting to remove. So where do we relocate them? What's the next step after that? What's the cost? I would assume that would be far greater than any coastal barrier system we could dream up.
Well, the coastal barrier system wouldn't have any impact on the flooding in the first place. I'm asking a question. I would like for you to ask those very questions.
I think you made a recommendation, not a question. That's a recommendation. Right?
I'm recommending that you work on it. Maybe I should rephrase that because it needs attention. We've got a lot of low-lying areas that are going to continue to flood, and the people of Texas aren't served by not taking care of that issue. There's flood remediation that you can do with dams to some degree, but there's limitations, and the people will have to go somewhere. I don't have good answers for that. Migration caused by climate change is going to be a very real part of our future. It's a part of the future now. People coming to the border of Texas are partly ones who have lost the capacity to farm in places like El Salvador and Guatemala. So, you know, we're dealing with these issues on a broad plate, if you will. So we need to be thinking about it. Maybe we can't move all the houses, but if you start thinking about it, we need to do something about it. And what is appropriate? What can the state do? What can we do with federal participation? What can we do at local levels? I know here in Austin, we have the Austin Disaster Relief Network. It's a temporary help, but we need longer-term solutions. And maybe we don't move all the houses. But some of the folks are in very dire straits still 5 years after Harvey.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir. Representative Paul. And remind you, we have an infrastructure discussion coming up tomorrow, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds kind of good.
It may relate to infrastructure. So.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. We're talking about a coastal barrier here to stop storm surge. Are you saying that you do not wish the state of Texas to be involved in storm surge protection? Because all you're talking about is flooding. It's got nothing to do with the topic of today.
Well, many times when the barriers talk about it, it says it will solve our hurricane issues.
No, it says that we're going to stop the storm surge, which is the most violent part of a hurricane. As you can see, when the storm surge, it comes over, destroys the property and back. We're talking about stopping storm surge, which is what does the damage.
Storm surge.
We're not talking about stopping rain. We're not talking about stopping wind. We're talking about a storm surge. Are you saying you do not wish the state of Texas to be involved in storm surge protection and leave these millions of people unprotected?
There are other alternatives besides the coastal barrier. Natural plans. There are a number of different plans.
The plan has natural protection in it, environmental protection is for the whole coast.
Part of it.
And it's got increased beaches and everything all in it.
There's some good there, but let me just point out, Hurricane Harvey was 125 billion or whatever the final number is in destruction. this coastal surge was in Galveston Bay, as best as I understand, it was less than 3 feet. It was not a material
That's
impact.
because Galveston didn't get hit by a Force 5 hurricane.
That's right, but Hurricane
Rockport
Harvey,
did.
Hurricane Harvey hung around, you know, like.
I
it's like-
understand. I live in there. I live in it.
Okay,
Did you
well-
live through Harvey? I did. But that the intent of this system has got nothing to do with protecting me from the flood of Harvey. It's got everything to do with protecting me from the storm surge that did all the destruction, like in 1900, Carla in 1961, Alicia in 1983, Rita just recently coming. This gentleman from Orange was just talking about all the events that hit him and the different hurricanes. We're talking about stopping storm surge here. I think
Conceptually,
tomorrow we're going to talk about rain.
Okay.
And the state of
I'll
Texas
be here
has
for
done
that.
billions of dollars for rain, so you can come talk about it. But I was just trying to figure out, was this whole testimony to say, hey, I don't want to build a storm surge and leave these people unprotected.
the broader question is, how do we prepare for hurricanes? Okay, that's really what the barrier is
No,
about,
the barriers for stopping storm surge.
which is a
We never think it
hurricane-related
could
issue.
stop wind.
It's not going to do anything for wind. It could
Right,
hurt with
we
rain.
didn't say it would. We're
And
just saying-
I'm-
we're just
I'm
trying to
for-
protect
I'm for-
storm surge. And that's what it's designed to do, which is the most destructive part and doing the most of the damage. You're saying, you still haven't said, do you say you don't want to do that?
I'm for stopping storm surge, but when
This is the way.
I'm trying to make the point that Hurricane Harvey was immensely destructive. And storm surge was,
No,
storm
we're going to
surge,
work on flooding. That's
storm
got
surge
nothing
was
to do
not a
with storm
part of the
surge.
problem, okay, for Hurricane
It
Harvey
is.
in Galveston Bay, in this area.
You don't think Galveston Bay could ever get hit by storm surge?
I think Galveston Bay could be hit by storm
Well, it
surge.
has numerous
And I
times,
would like
as I
to stop
said.
it. But I don't know that this plan, as I understand it, I mean, if you're only able to stop a Category 3 level storm with this surge, is it worth the money to do what you're
Well, when you're
describing?
destroyed by a Category 1 or 2, 3 storm, then I think you think it is, and I do think it is. Sorry to take so much time,
Oh,
Shep.
no, it was entertaining and enlightening. and kind of circular too. So anyway, Mr. Linenschmidt, we appreciate you bringing some thought-provoking points, and we'll certainly take it into consideration as we prepare our interim committee report.
Thank you, Mr.
Being
Chairman.
here. Yes, sir.
I appreciate y'all's time.